Vince Russo said he is the Antichrist of professional wrestling.
Okay, there's the referee. He's over towards Arquette. 1, 2, 3. What is it? Did David Arquette just... What's going on here? David Arquette won the world title. David Arquette won the world title. He can't believe it. David Arquette won the world title.
You got a guy named Vince Russo. I saw Vince Russo. I've been watching the pay-per-view because right here in the NWA is the last place that Russo has not killed.
All the things that I wanted to say to Vince Russo's face in this letter to Terry Taylor. One of the things was, I said, if I could figure out a way to murder him without going to prison, I would do it. And that's true, I would.
You know, I don't know anybody who's liked Vince Russo. I don't know how he still has a job. Look, but I don't get why they keep Russo. You know, Russo, when he left WWE, went to WCW, they went bankrupt and got bought by WWE. That tells you what kind of job he did. And the guy still has a job in wrestling, and a guy like Dutch Mantel doesn't.
For 2 years, Russo wrote all kinds of things to the WWF. I have this question. Hey, Russo, did you write in my cousin Owen's death? Did you write home? Did you ask about his family? He's dead. He was my cousin. He's dead. Why? Because someone like you, who knows nothing about the technicalities.
And I said he was an abominable prick, and I said that he had ruined the chances of TNA to be competitive with the WWE, and he'd ruined guys' lives and careers with his shitty booking, and he'd cost me money, and that I hated the thought of him, and I wake up from dreams where I'm in the act of murdering him. All these things are true.
If we do not stop Russo, he will kill professional wrestling for every one of you.
Okay, and welcome back to Inside the Ropes, and undoubtedly we have got the most controversial man in the history of pro wrestling. He is responsible for, in large part, for a lot of the Attitude Era that we all enjoyed. He's also a former WCW World Heavyweight Champion, and he's here with us tonight on Inside the Ropes. It is Vince Russo. Vince, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Happy to be here, guys.
So first of all, Vince, let's go back in time to the early 90s, and it was a phone call from Linda McMahon in 1992 that led to your first position in the WWF. Can you just kind of talk us through how that came about?
At the time I was doing a wrestling radio show in Long Island, New York, and it was a show that I was funding with my own money. And basically I was running out of money. So I wrote a letter to Linda McMahon, knowing that it would have been silly to write a letter to Vince McMahon because he, probably received thousands of letters a day. So I wrote a letter actually to Linda McMahon, introducing myself, telling her what I was doing, and looking for an opportunity, at the World Wrestling Federation at that time. And, really much to my surprise, Linda McMahon called me.
Vince, you went on to be the editor of the WWF magazine. You've been quite vocal about how you felt about the product in the mid-90s and that you kind of thought it was lame. I mean, specifically, what was it you didn't like about the WWF's product when they were sort of competing with Nitro?
That's a good question, because here we are. I mean, gosh, what are we here, 20 years later almost? I mean, and in my opinion, the wrestling business is at the same exact spot. And it was basically at that time, in my opinion, the WWE was just about 10 years behind with what was going on in society at the time. And I remember just telling Vince, Vince, it's not that difficult. We just really need to mirror what's going on in society right now, and that was the birth of the Attitude Era. And I feel, here we are in 2012, and I feel the wrestling industry is at the same exact place. I think time has passed them by. I think they've become irrelevant. The business has become irrelevant, and there's just nobody willing to make the changes that need to be made to bring the product up to speed in 2012.
And Vince, you mentioned that Vince McMahon took a little bit of time to get round to the idea that things had to change, but what was the deciding factor that resulted in you becoming part of the creative team?
I remember it was a Monday Night Raw where they were doing, it was being simulcasted. In the same night they were shooting in the States, and they were also shooting overseas. And I remember that because I remember one of the matches overseas was Owen against Davey Boy. And I remember the rating came in the next day, and it was like rock bottom. I mean, it was like maybe a 2.1. I mean, it was really, really a bad rating. And I went into work the next day, and literally as soon as I sat down at my desk, I got a call from Vince's assistant that, Vince wanted to see me, and my first thought was, what did I do now? I mean, honestly, that's what I thought, because I was being so vocal about the product at the time. And then, that's when I went up to Vince's office, and he had all his key people, in the room, and he had the Raw magazine in his hand. And I'm like, oh, man, he's going to make an example of me. And I was just ready to be fired again. And, he took that Raw magazine and he slammed it down on the desk and he said, this is what the show needs to be. And I got to tell you, I was absolutely shocked because I thought it was going the other way. And I had no dream whatsoever that that's the way it was going.
And Vince, moving forward now to the summer of 1998, the WWF were heading into SummerSlam at Madison Square Garden. The main event was going to be Steve Austin defending his title against The Undertaker. And you and Vince McMahon came to another heated argument over the face-heel dynamic, I believe, heading into this match. Just what were your thoughts on how it should have been done?
How do you guys know all this?
It's inside the ropes.
Too much time on our hands, Vince.
you guys are dead on. We did get that's probably one of the few heated discussions that him and I got into. And really what it was, Steve Austin and The Undertaker were very, very close friends at the time. And they wanted to go into that match with it being a babyface match. And I mean, you got to remember, I'm from New York. I mean, that's where I was born and raised. I've been to see wrestling in Madison Square Garden many times before I worked for the WWE. And I knew in my heart of hearts, this New York crowd is not going to want to see a babyface versus a babyface. Maybe if it was somewhere else. But I knew in New York, they were going to want to root for one guy and boo another in that particular case. And, I understand why Vince did. Those guys were the two main eventers. They were friends. They were leading the company. They made a ton of money for the company. And Vince was trying to, please them, and I totally understand that. But I also felt, in doing my job, I didn't feel it was the best story we could tell at the time. And I just, and I was just honest with Vince.
Yeah, and I know you'd said earlier on that, you were so driven every week to doing the best show, so some of the details, you might not remember, but at the beginning of 1999, Mick Foley famously won the WWF title on Raw, and then, obviously Mick was a sort of short-term champion, but there's been a sort of long-standing rumour, and I just wondered if you could clear it up for us, that the original plan was at WrestleMania 15, instead of it being Rock and Austin, that it would have been a three-way with Mick Foley. Is there any truth to that?
Absolutely. That's the way it was booked. But, somebody who wasn't involved in it had a very different opinion about it, and they kind of got in Vince's ear, and they kind of got in Austin's ear, and next thing I knew, Mick was out of the main event. And, like I said, I didn't agree with that either. I wasn't happy with it. I thought Mick earned his spot, but at the end of the day, I got to do what the boss wants, so we made the change.
Absolutely, and just to clarify the rumour, was it Shawn Michaels that had been the one that was kind of in Vince and Austin?
Could have been.
We'll leave that one there.
Vince, you're most synonymous with the Attitude Era, and rightly or wrongly, for some people, that represents the sort of arrival of sex and sleaze in wrestling. I guess the detractors would say that, with characters like Sable and Val Venus and The Godfather being introduced. And just how do you feel now about your legacy sort of being entwined with that? Like, or do you just think that that was how television and society was heading at that period, and that was like sort of natural progression?
That's exactly what I think, because like those characters weren't created to be shocking and raw and sexual. I mean, that's not how I created those characters anyway. I mean, I'll give you the two perfect examples. I mean, Val Venus was a guy, that was, he was at the wrestling school. He was ready to go. And, at that point, my job is to sit down, interview him, get to know him, and come up with some kind of a character for him. And I remember, having a couple of conversations with, Sean at the time, and like, I couldn't put my finger on, who is this guy? What is this character? And I remember sitting there and like just saying to myself, this guy just reminds me of a sleazy porn star. I'm being honest. That's what I got out of it. That's who he reminded me of. So that's when I went with this. I said, I got to be honest with you. This is what I keep walking away with. And I mean, like I said, it wasn't we're gonna make this guy the porn star, and it wasn't that. And then my gosh, you talk about somebody like Sable coming along. I mean, you can't create that kind of sensuality and sexiness, and I mean, that's who she was, And then, I guess you could probably throw DX in there, but, all they were a group of friends that just wanted to, go out and, cause hell wherever they went. So, like I said, none of that stuff was really done by design. It just kind of developed,
And when you went to WCW in 1999 initially, what were the biggest differences that you noticed when you went there?
Right off the bat, it was just a political animal. It was so political, and you've got to understand, I never experienced that at the WWE. At the WWE, I worked directly with Vince. Vince had my back. Vince made it clear that nobody screwed with me, and I was just allowed to concentrate on the job. And I was just allowed to concentrate on the writing of the show. Well, when I went to WCW, now all of a sudden there's a huge target on my back. There is no protection. There are people that think they could do a better job than I could. The political game starts. So immediately now I've got to have eyes in the back of my head, and it just, I literally knew that, in the first month that I was there. And I knew, with that, I knew it wasn't going to work, because I knew that I wasn't going to be able to be successful in that kind of environment, because I don't get involved in those games. It's kind of, let me write the show or get somebody else to do it. So I kind of knew early on what I had gotten into and that it wasn't going to work.
Vince, at this point, the animosity between the WWF and WCW was being played out on television. Like, there was the Billionaire Ted skits on WWF, and then Eric Bischoff famously gave the order to give away the Mick Foley title win on Raw. But one of the ones that sticks in people's minds and leaves a bit of a sour taste was when Ed Ferrara did the JR parody Oklahoma. And I was wondering, if looking back now, do you think that was the point where maybe the animosity went a little bit too far and it got too personal?
Absolutely. There's no question about it. But that's where it was at that time. And I'm not gonna lie. I look at that now and I'm like, how could you do that? It blows my mind that I can look back now and know that I did that. But again, that's just kind of where it was at the time. And I mean, thankfully, I've had probably 3 or 4 conversations with JR since I was able to apologize. I was able to get that all off my chest. But yeah, no, that definitely. I mean, being 51 and looking at that now, I don't know what I was thinking, but it was wrong.
One of the most interesting parts of your philosophy on wrestling, I think, is you've said before about belts being props. And obviously in the past, you were in the booking team when Vince McMahon was booked to win the title in the WWF. And then the David Arquette incident, which I know that you've spoken about many times, and obviously yourself, booking yourself as the world champion as well. I just wondered if you could sort of take us into your perspective of what a belt in wrestling represents, compared from what a traditional wrestling fan would maybe say, I can't believe he put that belt on Arquette. Where do you stand with that?
To me, and I mean, this started, it started with me, the first time I ever watched wrestling, I was probably 12. The first time I ever saw wrestling, it was clear to me it was entertainment. I mean, I knew it wasn't real. At no point did I ever think it was real. The characters were great. The characters were larger than life. The characters were over the top. The storylines were right out of Soap Opera Digest. And to me, it was entertainment. And that's what it always was. And, that's why to me, you've got this championship belt. It's not real. These matches aren't real. Nobody's winning this belt. We're writing it that way. So, basically, use that belt as part of the entertainment. And I mean, I feel that way to this day. I mean, like I said, when I first turned on wrestling and I was 12 years old and I saw, Captain Lou Albano and the Valiant Brothers, I got it. I mean, I understood what wrestling was. And, I think it's safe to say that I think the majority of the people, do as well, So that was just always my philosophy.
TNA debuted a lot of new stars who would go on to become very popular, like AJ Styles and James Storm. But unfortunately, like in the years since then, TNA have seemed to have moved away from that an awful lot. They put a lot of emphasis on Sting, who was obviously a household name because of WCW, and they sort of take a lot of the WWE stars that move away from that company. And why do you think TNA sort of struggled to create their own brand names?
Because I think there's a lack of patience. Ratings don't happen overnight. You can look at the history of the business. You can look at the web and flows. Ratings do not happen overnight. Ratings happen when you commit to something and you stay the course. That's why the Attitude Era worked. Vince was committed to it. We knew what we were doing. We didn't let the rating up or down affect us on a weekly basis. We wrote it out. And, unfortunately, that was never the mindset at TNA. And, there was a lot of emphasis put in what the rating was from week to week, and then which caused, which then creative is being kind of directed to jump all over the place. It doesn't work that way. You've got to commit to something and you got to stay with it. It might take a year, but if you stay with it and if you believe in it, it's going to work. But it's not going to work if every 2 months or every 6 weeks, you're changing course and you're going a different direction. And I just, I feel, even when I was there, I feel that, TNA been guilty of that for a very long time.
And Vince, in TNA the past few years, there was some really great moments with Samoa Joe and Kurt Angle with the sort of realistic style, and there was the big match in 2009 with Sting and Mick Foley. And then TNA had what was called a game changer announcement in October 2009 when they signed Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff. And you know, Vince Russo, Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan are three names that certainly had a huge impact in 11 million people watching pro wrestling in the late 90s. So I think a lot of people expected when those three names came together, it could potentially, you know, launch TNA into the stratosphere. And I just wondered, looking back on it now, why do you think that didn't quite work out with the three of you together?
You know, it's real simple, because you can't have all these strong, different personalities and opinions working together. You can't. Now, I will, you know, like the bottom line is, I worked very peacefully with Hulk Hogan. I worked very peacefully with Eric Bischoff. But like a part of that is, in working together like that, and you know, everybody really trying hard to get along, and everybody really wanting to get along, what each person is really doing is you're compromising all your ideas and all your beliefs so everybody gets along. You know, and you know, because you know, at the end of the day, we all work together. We all wanted to get along, you know, because that was really the only way the company was going to be successful. But like I said, in doing that, all personalities, you know, nobody's getting their way. Everybody is taking what they believe and what their opinion is, and they're compromising it to get along with everybody else. And in my opinion, that's not the way to do business. It's not a good way of doing business. I think there needs to be, you know, one boss. There needs to be one creative laying out the direction. If it's working, you go with it. If it's not working, get rid of the guy and bring the next guy in. I mean, I still am a firm believer in that. But when you've got so many different chefs and so many different opinions, and everybody's trying to get along and everybody's trying to make everybody else happy, you're going to get a product that's very vanilla. And, you know, unfortunately, again, in my opinion, I think that's what happened with the product.
Vince, was it that kind of frustration at too many cooks in the kitchen? Is that what led you to leave the company?
Yeah, I mean, it was. And, you know, like I said, I didn't, you know, there were no fights, you know, with anybody. It was nothing like that, but it was kind of like with me, you know, it was like, okay, it was me, Eric, and Hulk. Okay, that's cool. Well, now you're going to bring in Bruce Pritchard, so now it's going to be, okay, me, Eric, Hulk, and Bruce. It gets to a point where it's too much. And when it gets to the point where, like, I feel, you know, I'm wasting my time and I'm wasting their time because I can't be the real, true Vince Russo, and I can't do what I know I can do, and I can't do what I was created to do because there's too many levels to try to get it by. That's when I just know, you know, guys, it's a waste of my time and it's a waste of your time because you're not getting what you paid for. And that's when, you know, like I said, once another chef was added to that kitchen, it just, you know, to me, I just took a step back and I'm like, this is just too much. And, you know, for the good of the company, somebody needs to bow out of this. And I mean, I just decided that it would be me.
Vince, one quick thing about TNA before we move on. It does seem like an environment designed to hold people back and to sort of stunt creativity. If there was one thing that you would have liked to have done while you were there at the company, what would that have been? Is there like one big idea you had that you never got to see to fruition?
To be honest with you, and I don't mean for this to sound arrogant, if there is one thing that I would have liked to have done, it would have been to do everything that I wanted to do. That's what it would have been. Not compromising anything. The only time in my career that I was successful was when I was with the WWE. And the reason was that Vince gave me the ball and he let me run with it. There were no committees. There were no, 6 other people's opinions. He trusted in me to, give me the ball, let me work with Ed. Ed and I were at the same page. There was no ulterior motives. Ed was phenomenal. We were on the same page. We thought alike. We got along. Let us run with the ball. We'll give you a show. You make that show better, and the rest is history. That was the only time in my career that I was allowed to work that way. So, I know what kind of an environment I need to be put in to be successful. And I don't care what anybody says. Committees in the wrestling business do not work. Somebody needs to show me a committee over the last 50 years that worked. They don't work. There's too many opinions. There's too many egos. There's too many hidden agendas. And there's a lot of time wasted. You need to have a head writer who's allowed to bring in his crew, and he's allowed to run with the ball, pass or fail. If he's successful, ride him out. If he's not, get rid of him. But anything else is going to be vanilla, and it's going to be a so-so product, and I think that's what you're seeing now in the business in general, not just TNA.
One of your biggest critics, and I'm sure you're aware of this before we even say it, but one of your biggest critics is Jim Cornette, and I'm sure you're aware of some of the things that he said. And why is that relationship so bad? And do you think ultimately it's just a clash of philosophy on pro wrestling that maybe has...
It definitely is. And, here's the thing. The relationship isn't bad on both... I don't have a problem with Jim Cornette. I don't have a problem in the world with him. I don't badmouth him. I don't say bad things about him. I never have. I've never done that. The problem lies with him. It doesn't lie with me. And absolutely, it's almost like, the way the internet feels about Vince Russo. And at the end of the day, all it is different philosophies. Eric Bischoff and I have different philosophies. Okay, Eric Bischoff and I don't hate each other. Hulk Hogan and I have different philosophies. Hulk Hogan and I don't hate each other. Bruce Pritchard and I have different philosophies. I don't hate Bruce. I don't think Bruce hates me. There's nothing wrong with having different philosophies, but I think just for some reason Jim is just taking it to the extreme, and that's his deal. That's not mine.
And Vince obviously mentioned again the sort of internet fans who have they sort of posit themselves as traditional wrestling fans, and they complain an awful lot about the product now and sort of suggest that everything would be better if there was just actually more wrestling on television. Like usually a Monday Night Raw or an Impact will come rolling round, and the biggest complaint you hear is that there wasn't enough in-ring action. And I just think, do you think that fundamentally that wouldn't fix wrestling? That it's not a case of more in-ring work to get the ratings back up?
No, because all you have to do is look at the ratings. All you have to do is look at the ratings, and the consistently the lowest rated segments on the show are the wrestling matches. And that's not Vince Russo's fault. That's the facts, and that's the numbers, and that's what it is. And what a lot of that has to do with is wrestling fans are going to watch the show as long as the word wrestling is in the title. They're going to watch the show. But if you're a non-wrestling fan and you don't like wrestling, well, you're only going to watch the show for everything else. And that's why when it's a non-wrestling segment, you've got the wrestling fans watching it, and then you have the non-wrestling fans watching it. And that's, again, it's like, the internet doesn't understand, when I was writing, I got paid by the numbers. I didn't get paid by, the internet
star ratings.
opinion. yeah. I mean, I got paid by the numbers, and that was my job, and I just don't know why that is so hard for, people to understand. I mean, that's the reality,
So do you think in the boom period of the Attitude Era that the mass people that were coming to watch wrestling at the time were more attracted to the storylines and the characters as opposed to the actual in-ring wrestling?
Oh, there's no question about that. That's why the numbers were what they were then, and they are what they are now. I mean, there's no question about that. But again, the problem now is industry wide. It's not a TNA problem. It's not a WWE problem. It's industry wide. And until people want to get serious about taking the chances that really need to be taken, unfortunately, I just don't see the tide turning around anytime soon.
Mm. And Vince, something that I found interesting over the last few years, and I just wonder what your take on it was, is that fans, or older fans now, slam the PG-rated WWE product, and they really wanted to go back to the Attitude Era, which is kind of funny because the internet fans give you such a hard time, but at the same time all they keep complaining about is how they wish it was more like when you were in charge. So do you think that wrestling should look to the past, look to the Attitude Era, or has that period passed and it's time to stay progressive and move on to the future, whatever that may be?
Yeah, the Attitude Era is definitely gone. I mean, there's no question about that. It is gone. It's been gone for a long time. The problem is that people involved in the business right now, they don't know what the wrestling business is. They don't know anymore. They don't know what it should be. Should it be more wrestling? Should it be cartoon characters? Should it be the Attitude Era? They don't know what it should be. And, unfortunately, as they're going through this period, there's been a sharp decline in the ratings. And it's, that's why it's like, okay, I'm sitting on the sidelines and I'm watching now and I'm just saying, you know what, somebody needs to do something, because these ratings of these shows aren't just magically going to turn around. There is no magic bullet. Changes need to be made, and if they're not made, it's just going to continue going on the way it's going on.
And obviously in wrestling at the moment, WWE brought back The Rock, and they brought back, he headlined WrestleMania, Brock Lesnar came back, and the ratings haven't really reflected that much of an increase. What do you think went wrong with that? I mean, do you think that was going to happen regardless of who they brought in?
I mean, you've been there and you've done that. I mean, nothing against those guys. They're all great performers. I mean, they are. But it's, the audience who was watching back then aren't necessarily watching right now. So, it's, and plus the people that were, it's okay, we've been there and we've done that. I think the people want something new. And, that's nothing against The Rock or Brock or any of those guys. I mean, they're great, they're great stars. I just think the people want something new, and they just want to see the wrestling business become more relevant.
And the way that we usually like to close out the show with our guests is to do quick fire thoughts, if you don't mind. So we'll just give you a name of a wrestling personality, and you can just let us know what you think. So the first name we've got is Hulk Hogan.
I mean, when you say Hulk Hogan, the first thing that comes to my mind is legend. I mean, honestly, that's what I think.
The second name. Sorry, Vince.
He is the guy. I mean, that's it.
And the second name we had was Ric Flair.
When you say that, I just think of wrestling.
And the next name we've got for you is Sting.
Well, I out of those guys, I obviously had the closest relationship with him over the years. I mean, him and I were very, very close. And, to me, like, that's why I look at that one more on a personal level. And, like, when you say Sting, I just think of gentleman. you know, he's a man. You know, he's one of the nice guys in the wrestling business. He's a true stand-up guy, and you know, I mean, he was a guy that I'm proud to have worked with at TNA for all those years.
And the next name we have for you, Vince, is Dixie Carter.
Confused.
Confused.
Yep.
And the next name we have for you, Vince, is Jim Cornette.
Great wrestling mind.
And we also wondered what your thoughts were on Vince McMahon.
The creator. You know, I mean, he created it all. You know, without him, you know, none of us would have been employed. He is, when it comes to the wrestling business, he is the creator.
And the last name we've got for you, Vince, is, you know, someone that I'm sure you've got a lot to say about. We just wondered what you thought of Mantour.
Mantour, his head was too big.
One of the greats, Vince.
That's the only thing I could think of. His head was too big.
Too much paper mache in the office that day.
Exactly. Yeah, they had to get rid of the paper mache.
And just the last sort of question we've got for you, Vince, is: have we seen the last of Vince Russo in pro wrestling, or would you consider going back to TNA or the WWE under the right circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, again, I would, you know, if I'm done, I'm done, and I mean that's okay. Like, I honestly don't have a problem with that, because the only way I would be interested in going back is if I had the opportunity to be me and do what I know I could do. You know, I mean, to be handcuffed and to be kept inside a box, I'm not going to do that. I mean, I'm too old to do that. You know, that's not fun for me. That's not who I am. So, you know, if the situation arose where it was the right situation and I was allowed to be me, yeah, I mean, I would probably be interested. But if that situation never arises again, then it was never meant to be, and that's okay too.
So yeah, thank you very much, and we hope you enjoy your evening.
All right, guys, and good luck with everything.
All right,
Thank you
too.
very much, Vince.
Take care. Bye.
Okay, guys, take care, man. Bye.